I'm going to drop a spoiler warning right from the start. I don't even want to worry about splitting this video up or showing you footage that might qualify as spoilers, so if you're okay with spoilers, let's move on with the video. Otherwise, you should watch the episode first. So, Doctor Who's second New Year's Day special has recently arrived to some mostly positive reception, it seems, although there are a number of people that didn't like it. Most of the reactions I've seen have been quite positive. I, for one, thought that this episode was great. My immediate thought after watching the New Year's Day trailer was just how are they going to reintroduce the Daleks in a way that feels fresh while staying true to who the Daleks are. My assumption was that we would be dealing with one Dalek, which turned out to be true, and I really had a hard time coming up with a way to reintroduce the Daleks in a way that wasn't just a recreation of the X-Men episode from 2005, Dalek. So it's a good thing that I didn't write this episode of the show, because they managed to do exactly what I was worried they wouldn't be able to do. I really did like the way that they introduced the history of this Dalek, how it was on Earth during the 9th century and was destroyed and placed in 3 different locations across the world. Although it seems very unlikely to me that people would be able to actually destroy a Dalek with what they had back in the 9th century, even working together. I can roll with that enough for the sake of the episode. So I found that for the most part, the way they brought back the Daleks was pretty smart. It does seem a little bit odd that the Dalek can teleport dead pieces of itself back together without knowing what they were and without any technology, but again, that's something I'm able to roll with, although I probably would have preferred that we were just dealing with 1/3 of a Dalek. I'm not really sure. It doesn't totally work for me, but I can look beyond that because it's not a huge problem of the episode. So I do like how for the first 35 or so minutes of this episode, we are actually dealing with a Dalek outside of its casing. It's incredibly unique, and I found it to be a great way to tell the story. We've seen Daleks outside of their casing before, as early as the 60s, but nothing like this, and not to this extent. The idea that this Dalek is more advanced than most works well for this one, and how it can control a host body, although that makes me doubt even more that they were able to kill it during the 9th century, but, you know, whatever. So the Dalek is sufficiently menacing during its time outside of its casing, and that whole part played really well for me. And I also did really like how the Dalek recreated its own casing using old bits of itself and scrap metal. That was cool, though it does raise even further questions still about how they defeated the Dalek in the 9th century, and I know that they tried to explain it, but that only served to confuse me further, because I felt that made it make even less sense and be even more unbelievable. But that's something that I don't really think about while watching the episodes. I'm able to, look past that a little bit. And the important thing to remember about all of these little complaints that I have is that they aren't actually that big of a deal to me, because they don't bother me while I'm watching the episode, so they don't hamper my enjoyment of the story. So I can acknowledge that these are issues for me, but I can watch the episode without thinking very much about them, so it doesn't really detract from my experience all that much. That's something to keep in mind about how I am viewing this episode. One of the biggest complaints about the episode, and it's not a huge one, is that I'm just not a fan of how they defeated the Dalek with the microwave oven. It just seemed a little bit ridiculous to me, and I found it relatively hard to swallow. Also, the fact that the Dalek survived the molten metal falling on top of it, and how it got out of there without anyone noticing, that was all very hard to believe, and I didn't love that section of the episode. But fortunately, that did lead to the actual ending, which I did enjoy. Everybody's in the TARDIS, and there's the Dalek there with Ryan's dad, and there's this situation that they have to get out of, and I was dead certain that Ryan's dad was going to die, because they'd spent so much time building up his character, and I thought, well, if we're in this situation, then what Chris Chibnall's done is try to make us care about him so that when he dies, then we will actually care. So I thought he'd kind of given away his hand there, but it turned out he survived. So that was a nice little surprise, actually. And actually, he was one of 2 people I really thought was going to die, and the other was, gosh, I can't remember her name, but the woman from the beginning, I really thought she was going to die as soon as she went to look for the Dalek. I was certain, but she survived, which was another surprise. Also, I did like those 2 characters. I can't remember either of their names, but I did like both of those new characters that we had at the front end of the episode. They were enjoyable, and they had cute chemistry. I was surprised at how well they worked. So, in terms of the tone of this episode, I would have preferred something closer to what we had in that 2005 episode, Dalek, because I think that would have made it easier to feel the threat and menace of the Dalek, but they added a lot of comedy that kind of took a little bit away from it. So I felt this episode didn't fully embrace how good it could have been, but it was still really good. I just wish that it had leaned away from the comedic tendencies that Chris Chibnall seems to have. Also, there was a really forced joke about Wi-Fi, which I could not stand. It was like 30 seconds long, and it was the most awkward dialogue, and it was so unbelievable, and it was so unfunny, and it really took me completely out of the episode, and it was not necessary whatsoever. If I could cut one scene from this entire season, it would definitely be that episode, because that did detract from my experience watching it. It was the moment in the series that took me out of the episode the most. So yeah, enough about that. The characters, they all were good. I like Ryan. I think he gets the most to do with his dad and his conversations, and I like how he stands up for himself. And Graham, of course, is lovely. As always, doesn't get a ton to do, but he's just really entertaining. And Yaz, oh gosh, Yaz didn't actually get a lot to do, but I just find that the more she's on screen, the more I enjoy her presence. I do hope she gets a lot more to do in season 2, but I do enjoy her. The pacing was really solid, by the way. We got through this episode in an hour, and the way that they introduced the Dalek and made that go through the episode, there was, for the most part, no moment that I was like, this feels off. And I guess the moment that did feel the most off to me was the Wi-Fi joke, but they were able to keep things moving at a really good pace and keep it really entertaining. And also the music, oh my gosh, at first I wasn't big on the music, but then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, actually, this really works. And it was less about thinking about it. It was more about rewatching it and then finding, you know what, I do actually genuinely like this music that they're using for the Dalek. And it just worked really well for me. And this episode looks gorgeous. I mean, there's some really great CGI towards the front end when they're watching the fireworks. And there's just a bunch in this episode that just really, really works for me. It just looked gorgeous. Overall, I thought this was a great episode. It really felt like this was a proper reintroduction of the Daleks. And this, to me, is probably the best Dalek story in at least 5 years. I don't think we've had one this good since, I'm not even sure when. It's been a while, though. I was really happy with this episode. I thought the characters were great. I thought we had a really entertaining story. That scene with the Dalek when it confronts the military. There's just so much in this episode I really liked. And I do have my issues with it. It's not perfect, but it is really entertaining, and it was definitely a good enough introduction of the Daleks, and I thought it was great. So I'm going to give Resolution a rating of 9 out of 10. So this concludes my Series 11 review videos, and that means that shortly after this I'm going to be bringing you my Series 11 overview/review video where I talk about the whole thing, how I think it went, how I think it was received, and both critically and by the fandom, and just how much of a success I think it was, and just my overall thoughts on that. So that's going to be coming to you shortly, and then after that I have one more video relating to Doctor Who, before I get back into the Classic Who reviews. So that's going to be all for today, folks. I hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching. Take care, and have a lovely week.